Welcome to part 2 on the session of measuring social impact. My name is Robert Moosbrugger. I'm a research associate at the University of Applied Sciences in Vorarlberg, which is in Western Austria. Now, what are the learning objectives for the part 2 and 3 of this session? In the part 1 of the session, Harshita gave you an introduction to social impact measurement, including its definition, purpose, and history. Now, in part 2, we will learn the basic concepts and tools for measuring social impact, which are needs assessment, theory of change, and the logic model. And then in part 3, the last part, we will look into tools for measuring social impact and reflect critically also on the concept of social impact measurement. Now, first of all, I'd like to point out that there is no single internationally accepted conceptual framework or methodology for social impact measurement. Nevertheless, the process of measuring social impact is fairly standardized. Most organizations follow the same steps, and these steps include 5 elements. So first of all, you start with the needs and context analysis. Based on that, you develop a theory of change. You refine it in a logic model. And once you have that, you can start implementing your initiative. And you'll start monitoring and evaluating, basically gathering data on your initiative. And then once your initiative is implemented, or maybe it's an ongoing initiative, so you'll then have also an annual reporting, for example, of your initiative. So you do a social impact reporting. So these are the 5 steps of the process for measuring social impact that most organizations follow. And we will now look into each of these 5 steps. Let's start with the needs assessment and context analysis. So for your own community enterprise, you of course need to have a very good understanding of what are the needs of your target group and what is the context in which you are working. So, and for that, you actually collect data on the target groups and their needs. You identify and involve the main stakeholders for your initiative. You look into what are other organizations, other entities offering, where are gaps in support, for example, for your community or for your target group. And very importantly, you actually need to have a very good understanding of what is the problem that you want to address, what are its causes and effects, and what are the societal challenges and the situation in target area that you are working. Now, let's look more closely into the stakeholder analysis, which is one of the main tools actually for your needs assessment. And for the stakeholder analysis, you usually use a table like this one. You can find them easily on the internet if you look for stakeholder mapping, or here I've got also a source where you can find this particular example. But basically what you do here is you list the various target groups that you want to work with, and you'll then describe how are they integrated into your project, for example. You look into what is their influence on the project. Will they have, what is their attitude to the project? Maybe there will be, maybe some of them can have a negative influence on your project also. So you look into what positive and negative influence they could have on your project. And you look also at how you can actually integrate your stakeholders adequately in your project. So you look into those elements for your target groups and for the stakeholders, and you gather them this information systematically in such a table. And this will give you a very good idea and overview of the people you are working with. As a next step, you need to have a very good understanding of what is actually the problem that you are addressing. And one excellent tool to do this is the problem tree. So here we've got an example actually from a development context, international development. And here actually it's a problem in a community that has a river and where the water quality in the river is deteriorating. So first of all, you need to clearly define the problem that you want to address in this community. So here the problem is the river water quality is deteriorating. So that's the main challenge that you or your organization want to address in this particular community. Now, then you start to look into what are actually the causes of this problem. So, for example, the high levels of solid waste dumped into the river, or that there is no wastewater treatment, etc., etc. And you look also into the various sub-causes of the causes that lead to this problem. And once you have identified this, you also look into what are the effects of this problem. So where is this, what is this doing in your community? And here, for example, you identify as one of the effects that the income in the community is declining because people can no longer find sufficient fish in the river. It's one of the effects. And what is important here is that you clearly map out all the causes and effects of your problem, and that you do this in a participatory way, including your target groups and stakeholders to get a really good and clear picture of what is the problem situation. And then as a next step, you simply turn this problem tree into a solution tree. That means you start reformulating the problems into solutions. That means the quality of the water, which was a problem, you describe it as a solution in that your project will bring about, meaning river water quality is improved, for example. The same with the causes. For example, wastewater treatment meets environmental standards, or the quantity of solid waste dumped into the river is reduced, etc., etc. And you also think about what will be the effects, the positive effects then, once you have addressed all these causes. And once you have improved the water quality in the community, well, one of the effects that you expect is, for example, that the number of fish will rise and that the families will have an increased income. So again, it is very important that you develop the problem and solution tree in a participatory way, so that you and your stakeholders and your target groups, that you have a common understanding of the problem that you're addressing and the vision of where you want to go to. Now, and this brings us to the next step, actually. Now, once you have identified your problem and the solution, you should develop a theory of change. And here I've got a nice quote from an English social scientist, Kurt Lewin. There's nothing more practical than a good theory. So if you want to change something in a social setting, you need to understand how things work. And you should not just assume that something will work, but you should actually have a theory of why this should work. Meaning that the project that you want to implement has to be based on, for example, previous experience, or on studies, scientific studies, for example, etc., etc. And that should help you actually to develop your theory of change. So the theory of change actually just means it's a theory of how and why something should work in the community. And it means mapping out a pathway of change from inputs and activities to outcomes and impacts. And what is important, you map out and clearly articulate the underlying assumptions and mechanisms why something would lead to the envisioned change. Often the theory of change is a visual representation of your initiative. And here I've got one example from an organization called Integrity Council. Maybe this example is a bit far removed from the community enterprise sector, but nevertheless, I think it's a good example because it shows you in one picture clearly what this organization wants to do and what is their theory of change. So this Integrity Council wants to actually achieve large-scale emissions reductions and removals of greenhouse gases. And the way to do that, according to them, is through the establishment of a carbon credit market. And so what they are doing is, or their theory is that if they create the conditions that ensure high integrity in the generation and exchange of voluntary carbon credit, this will lead to an increase in accountability and confidence in this mechanism. It will lead to a transparent and liquid market. And this will then send a powerful price signal to investors and buyers of carbon credits. And this will then lead to a drive in investment and supply also for carbon credits, and enable the market to grow. And this growing market will efficiently mobilize finance for projects and initiatives to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So this is their theory of change. And what I want to show here is that they've demonstrated it in a very simple way that makes it easy to communicate what your organization is all about and what you're aiming to do, and why you think that the things you do will lead to a change. So I highly recommend that for your own community organization or community enterprise that you develop a theory of change. And again, this theory of change should not just be based on your assumptions, but you should actually provide also evidence of why something should work. For example, that you know other initiatives where the same activity has worked, or there are scientific studies again that can prove that your approach is successful. Once you have your theory of change, as a next step, you develop a logic model which breaks actually down the various elements of your project into resources or inputs, the activities, the outputs, outcome, and the impact. And this is a logical sequence. So meaning that if you have the resources necessary, you will implement your activities. These activities will lead to certain outputs, which are the tangible results of your project. And these outputs will lead to certain outcomes. The outcomes are the changes in your beneficiary group, your target group. And these outcomes will also lead to a societal impact. And so there's a logical sequence of inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impacts. And that is the logic model, sometimes also called log frame. Yes, for an effective social impact measurement, it's highly recommended to develop such a logic model. That's all for part 2 of this session. And I look forward to meet you in part 3. In part 3, we'll look into the tools that can be used for gathering data for the social impact measurement. Thank you for your attention.